Welcome back to the Nutrition Made Simple podcast. At Healthy Steps Nutrition, we believe something as fundamental as nutrition shouldn't be complicated, which is why we focus on a simple, habit-based approach. We know that becoming the best and healthiest version of yourself isn't just about following macros, a meal plan, or killing yourself at the gym. You have to look at a holistic approach, looking at stress management, sleep, mindset, lifestyle, support system, and of course, exercise and nutrition. I'm your host, Nicole Aucoin, Registered Dietitian and founder of Healthy Steps Nutrition, CrossFit HSN, and HSN Mentoring. I'm also the author of the Healthy Kids Cookbook, 100% kid-approved recipes the entire family will love. You can find it on Amazon. In this podcast, I'm going to teach you how to take one step at a time to becoming the healthiest version of yourself. Today's podcast guest is Amanda Haar. She's the lead registered dietitian at Healthy Steps Nutrition HQ, and she specializes in hormone and women's health. She recently wrapped up a 6-week women's challenge, specifically talking about hormone health and teaching these women all about what's going on in their cycle, metabolism, and how to optimize their hormones throughout their cycle. Well, it was super, super interesting and informative. I learned so much about myself and my hormones, even just watching her videos. On today's podcast, we talk about the 4 phases of your menstrual cycle, what happens to your hormones during each phase, what strengths you have during each phase, and then recommended foods and exercises during each phase of your cycle. This one is one you might want to take notes on. If you're listening to this podcast on a walk or in the car, not a big deal. Click the link in the show notes and we have some extra notes written out for you so you can refer back to and you don't have to jot every single thing down. I hope you enjoy this episode with Amanda and we will get to it right after this message. Well, we officially launched continuous glucose monitoring with high accountability nutrition coaching, and the feedback has been incredible. Clients are loving the fact that they can see what's going on the inside of their body as it's happening. They can see what foods they're tolerating, what foods they're not tolerating. We're also helping them correlate how they sleep with what they ate, how they recover. It has been an awesome, awesome experience. The reason why I paired continuous glucose monitoring with high accountability nutrition coaching is to give clients that instant feedback loop. Clients are meeting every single week with their nutrition coach to go through their numbers from the past week, start talking about why things are happening, and create a customized plan just for them. If you are interested in getting on the wait list for continuous glucose monitoring paired with nutrition coaching at Healthy Steps Nutrition HQ with one of our registered dietitians, we would love to help you. Click the link in the show notes and apply today. All right, let's get to this episode on metabolism and optimizing your hormones throughout your cycle. Enjoy. Amanda, welcome back to the Nutrition Made Simple podcast.
Thanks for having me here, Nicole.
So you have a personal passion for hormone health. We've talked about this on multiple episodes, which we will link in the show notes. But today I want to dive into a little bit more of the nitty-gritty around your cycle, hormones, metabolism. There's so much information in there. Let's just talk about big picture here. Why should women care about this?
Right. So really cool things to think about, because a lot of the research that we have on physical activity, nutrition, just health and wellness are based on studies with men or postmenopausal women, because women with cycles are a little bit too complicated for a lot of research studies. So when we have this information, we can actually use our hormones to our advantage instead of feeling controlled by them. I know for a lot of people I work with, they feel like, oh, I have these cravings at this time and I just can't control it. Or, I just feel so different in my thinking and I just can't control it. We can use this information to optimize our overall well-being, functioning, our health by utilizing this information.
So I've learned so much from you. You actually recorded a bunch of video content that I had to listen through to make sure it all sounded really good at the end from the production videographer. And you talked a lot about that specific instance, right, with your hormone levels changing and how different types of exercise, even different types of foods to help you optimize your exercise, recovery, productivity, relationships. There are so many things that go into this. You actually just wrapped up a 6-week women's health study, Know Your Health, Know Your Hormones. There were quite a few women in there that you worked with individually, and then they also worked in a group. And I was like, man, Amanda, I feel like more people need to hear this information. So here we are with this podcast. It was interesting when we were talking about who should we target to sign up for the challenge. You were like, Nicole, anyone from, hey, I'm just getting my period to I'm in menopause. Why did you say that?
Right. Well, because any woman of any of those ages has a cycle that is changing their brain throughout the month, changing their hormones throughout the month. And really, once we tap into those natural body rhythms, we can be healthier, fitter, more productive, and have healthier relationships all around. For the younger women who are just getting their period for the first time, I think it's so cool how they can have that understanding early on of maybe how my brain is changing, why I might not get along with my parents, the 2 weeks before my cycle hits. Just knowing the whys around it, around what's happening, has made such a difference, especially, speaking of the women who are in the health and hormone challenge. A lot of them said, I've had a cycle for 20, 30 years, but I didn't know this information before. Now it's all making sense of the why I tend to do what I do, or why I tend to be a little bit more clumsy with my weightlifting in the week or two before my period. So really, understanding why our body and our brain is doing those things is so helpful for us to take a step back and kind of plan out how we can optimize that versus just kind of riding that wave through there.
I can think of personal examples, about to get my period and just not having a great workout and being super frustrated, down on myself, right? I should have done better in that workout. And then you go back a week or two later, oh, okay, man, I did do a bunch better. But I think it really allows you as a female to give yourself a little bit of grace at the end of the day.
Definitely. That's a great example because someone in the challenge did say, I did a workout and it was actually during her menstrual phase or during her period time. And she's like, you know what? I didn't do great, but I tried it again 3 days later when I was out of that phase and I did better. And otherwise she would have gotten down on herself about that too. So it's really cool that grace, it seems like such a small thing, but it's so huge in all aspects of our life, right? Even our eating patterns. If we know that we tend to be more hungry during a certain phase of our cycle, we don't have to get down on ourselves of not staying at the same macros and calories that we would have the first half of our cycle.
Super, super interesting. So let's dive into the nitty gritty here. So different phases during your cycle. How many phases are there?
Sure. There's 4 phases, which actually kind of parallels the seasons of the year. So this really helps to kind of illustrate the different seasons or phases of the cycle.
Okay. Let's start with phase number 1. When is it? What is it called? What should we be thinking about?
Right. So according to kind of our medical system, phase 1 of our cycle is day 1 of regular flow of your period or menstrual cycle. So if you see a little bit of spotting one day, that's not technically day 1. Day 1 is actually when you are, having a period. And that is the menstrual phase. So this kind of parallels the season of winter, which I think is really cool because it is very important for us to rest at this time. Our hormones are at our lowest, so our body can tend to be a little bit colder during this time. It doesn't have the heat of the hormones high going on. And your energy may be lower during that time as well. A cool strength of our brains, and again, our brains change throughout each cycle, but one big strength at this time is intuition. So since our estrogen and progesterone levels aren't really high, we tend to kind of ignore things in kind of the middle of our cycle. But when those hormones are lower, it creates a little bit of space for that kind of intuition to come into play, which I think is really, really cool because again, when your brain changes throughout a cycle, it can kind of be hard to keep consistent with what your thought patterns are. But if you know that really I'm going to tune into, let's say, how does my work life work for me? How are my relationships working for me? And really kind of tune in during that time, it can be really powerful for taking those steps ahead.
I love it. Okay, so hormones are at their lowest. What would we say in regards to exercise during this time?
Right. So, and I have to say, a lot of this information has been so helpful. I love reading the book In the Flow by Elisa Vitti. And in that book, she mentions you can even make naps and exercise during your menstrual phase, because really enough rest is going to be really important for giving your body the energy that it needs to do everything it needs throughout the next cycle. So, and of course, not saying we can't exercise by any means, but really kind of thinking about how we can reserve some of our energy during this phase. Yoga, mat Pilates, walking can feel really good during this time. I know for me a couple months ago, I took some walks during my menstrual phase. Towards the end, I took a run, but then I felt really, really tired the rest of the day. So I thought, okay, I kind of pushed the envelope a little bit. And so this might look completely different to different people. Like CrossFitters, you probably can still do CrossFit during that time, but maybe you want to scale a couple things back so that you're reserving some of your energy for, a little bit later in the month when you have a little bit more of those hormones supporting your performance.
I love it. Now that we've kind of talked about exercise, I definitely want to dive into the relationship side of things. Like as hormones are changing, what should we be thinking about in regards to relationships? You already mentioned, hey, intuition is pretty high during this time. How could we correlate that with building relationships?
Right. So this is a time, especially if you have a significant other, to kind of make them aware that, this might not be a time where you want to be out and about and doing all the things and planning all the activities. Again, for some people they might, but for a lot of people, it's really important to prioritize self-care at this time. And I know in our busy world where we're all supposed to go all the time, it can be really hard to even, think about prioritizing 10 minutes of self-care. But whatever small changes that you can make to take care of yourself during that time, that again is going to set you up for success for a rest of a healthy cycle. And what I love to kind of go back to is, women in ancient times had a red tent that they got to go to when they were in their menstrual phase to get cared for by other women. They didn't have to run after kids. They didn't have to cook meals. They didn't have to do all the things that we're just expected to do like robots, every single day of our cycle. So it's a really great time to evaluate your goals, our project outcomes, listen to your gut instincts, and really just take care of yourself.
I love it. Okay. So that's menstrual phase. What's the next phase?
Right. So the next phase after that is follicular phase. So this kind of parallels the season of spring. It's kind of like that new beginning after we've kind of like hibernated a little bit in the menstrual phase. And this is when 15 to 20 eggs start to mature at this time. So what happens with our hormones is our progesterone is quite low. That comes in more into play in the second part of our cycle. But our estrogen levels begin to rise to help support what will be happening next, which will be hopefully ovulation. And so this is where we typically feel our energy levels starting to increase from, the rest of the menstrual phase.
Okay. Makes sense to me. As our progesterone levels are low, estrogen levels are rising, what could we think about in regards to strength during the follicular stage?
Right. So, and this is so fun because once you know this, you're going to look back at this and say, oh yeah, you're right. Creativity is actually one of our strengths during this phase. And it's so funny because I noticed during the follicular phase, like I'm more apt to like just have a random dance party with my kids, or I'll think of all the adventures that our family needs to take. Like this is where our brain really can think about new things and maybe new plans. Planning is a big strength as far as productivity goes during this time. So yeah, having adventures with your friends, family, and just maybe trying new foods, trying new workouts. This is going to feel really good during this phase.
Love it. Okay, let's talk about the next phase. What is the next phase?
Sure. So that is ovulatory phase. And this parallels the season of summer. It's kind of a very hot hormonal phase, if you'd say, because estrogen and testosterone levels are at the highest to support successful ovulation. So this is the time, basically, ovulation and the 5 days before are really the only days that a woman can be fertile throughout the month. So this is very different than men because men produce sperm every single day. So they're constantly fertile. For women, we only really have 5 days of a window where we're actually fertile throughout the month. And what has been really helpful with a lot of clients with tracking their hormones is the fertility awareness method, which allows us to track where we are in our cycle through our basal body temperature, through tracking cervical fluid. And so knowing when you're ovulating is really important to know when you're shifting into the next phase as well.
Okay, that makes sense to me. So hormone levels are at their highest. Let's talk about strengths during this time and exercise.
Right. So that's funny you mentioned strength, because we have a lot of strengths during this time. Communication typically comes really easily to us. This is a time where, planning more social events might not feel as energy draining, especially if you're more of an introvert. And intense workouts and group workouts where you're connecting with other people can be really fun at this time. And as far as, communication goes, it's pretty interesting because there's actually studies on during ovulatory phase, there's research on people tend to be just more attractive during this time. And researchers can't quite pinpoint what it is. There's just something about us that tends to be more attractive. And I think that's just the basic biology of I'm fertile right now.
Right. Okay. All right. As we wrap up, so that was our third phase. Let's talk about the last phase of the 4 phases of our cycle. What is the last phase?
Right. So basically after ovulation happens, then our body starts to crank out progesterone. So those levels start to rise. And this is important because basically it's going to be supporting the buildup of the uterine lining. So if that egg was fertilized after ovulation, this is really important because it needs a safe home to go into in order to support a life if that pregnancy happens. So at this time, since the progesterone levels rise, progesterone actually increases our metabolism. So this is where a lot of women kind of tend to come into this phase and think, oh no, I'm so hungry. I just want to eat this. I want to eat that. I want to eat sweets. And there's part of it that, if PMS is at play, like that can kind of exacerbate this. But our metabolism increases between 79 to almost 300 calories a day during the second half of our cycle. So this is why if someone isn't feeding themselves a little bit more snack or a little bit more complex carbohydrates, they're going to get those cravings for those other things because their body's just not getting enough.
Makes complete sense. Like, hey, tune into your body, right? Let's talk about relationships, productivity, exercise during this luteal phase.
Right. So at the first part of this phase, strength training is really helpful. Towards the end of the phase, you might feel your energy start to wane. So if you want to focus more on flexibility, that's really helpful. This is actually a time where we naturally have higher cortisol levels during the luteal phase. So if we are kind of overtraining at this time, that excess cortisol is going to work against any weight loss goals or lowering stress goals. So it's really important to, again, kind of think about how can I scale my workout so I'm more maybe strength focused than really high intensity exercise focused. And as far as like productivity goes, completing tasks will feel really good. And it's funny, I kind of equate this to kind of like the nesting that happens before a lady gives birth. It's like kind of getting everything in order before that rest time of the menstrual phase comes. So kind of, organizing the house, completing administrative tasks can feel really, really good and easy to do during this time.
Awesome. Man, there was so much information that was given during this podcast episode. In the show notes, we'll put a recap of like each phase, strengths, different things to think about, prompting questions for you. I do have one question though. A lot of people are on birth control. How does this impact you moving through those different phases?
Good point. Very good question. So when we're on a hormonal birth control, that is controlling our hormone levels. And our hormones tend to be at more of kind of like a even type of keel until, let's say, like if you're on oral birth control, you do your placebo week. So then the hormones are withdrawn and you have that kind of medicated period type of thing to come. So it is going to be different. Like you're probably not going to be feeling as much of the waxing and waning between, let's say, the follicular, the ovulatory, luteal phase, because you're not going to be ovulating. But I do have a couple clients who've been on birth control and utilized this and still had some benefit, especially because they tend to have, kind of that luteal phase type of things, like symptoms before their period comes. So that can definitely be utilized, but it's not going to be kind of to the full capacity that a, kind of regular up and down of hormones would be.
Okay, that makes complete sense. Any final thoughts as we wrap up? I'd love to just draw attention super quick when you are working with someone individually, because you have a lot of ladies that you work with in regards to specifically hormone health, helping them understand what foods are good for them at each phase and different times, and helping them create a customized plan. What does it look like for a woman to sign up with you and get help with you for nutrition coaching, specifically around hormone health?
Right. So in true HSN style, we like to take it one step at a time. So whatever foundations need to be set, we definitely set those foundations first of general nutrition. And then we can work in all different directions. It's so cool to see when some of these women get this information and start to apply it. I help them apply this information, because it can kind of be overwhelming to think about changes with my exercise, changes with my eating, changes with my productivity. But once we can kind of work together and help them stay accountable and show them how you can put this together, let's say utilizing the HSN recipes, it's really fun to see them get so excited about it and then also feel the effects of it. For example, like one of the clients I worked with this morning, we're working through, like, every week she's on a higher accountability plan. So we meet together every week, and now I can help her realize what is one or two things that I want to prep since I'm in, let's say, the luteal phase this week. So we can kind of work through it that way. For some women who have medical conditions that are hormonal based, like PCOS, endometriosis, we definitely utilize some good testing measures along with some supplement and nutrition specific steps for them as well.
I love it. Amanda, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today and sharing all of your knowledge. I know that you're just so passionate about helping people understand this, because it truly can take something that can be crippling for people and make it such an empowering experience.
So cool. Perfectly said.
I hope you enjoyed that episode with Amanda. Don't forget to click the link in the show notes where we have extra tips written out for you in each phase of your cycle. One of the things that's personally helped me and has helped a lot of our clients is downloading the Flow app. It's like a pink and white app, and it tells you what's going on with your hormones throughout your cycle, and also why you might have trouble sleeping, or what might be better for you during that specific phase. This is a great free app and a great free resource for you. Make sure you download the free one. Again, if you are looking for additional support, Amanda would love to help you. You can click the link in the show notes and apply for coaching. Once you apply for coaching, what happens is you end up setting a free discovery call up with us. We talk to you about what success looks like for you, what you're wanting, what you've done in the past, and we pair you with a nutrition coach and dietitian that is the best fit for you and your goals. So if you're looking for hormone health, Amanda's definitely your go-to person. Again, if you are interested in individualized help, click the link in the show notes, apply for coaching. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Please make sure that you subscribe, leave us a review. This really helps this podcast to reach more people. And we are all about providing free help so people can make informed choices and make health a way of life one step at a time. We'll see you back here next week.